The world is complex, the Bible is complex. Human existence is a tangled ball of experience, perception, and understanding. Ravel is a puzzling word, denoting both a tangling and untangling. This podcast attempts to hold honest conversations in good faith. Some ideas expressed in this podcast will be challenging. Others will be obvious. When a PhD in biblical interpretation and a habitually podcasting man-child discuss matters of society, scripture, and scandal, you get Ravel.
Hey everybody, you are listening to Ravel, and it's me, your best buddy Basil. And as usual, well, not as usual, as unusual, today I have with me, as always, the captivating, the amusing, the Zondervan vaudevillians, both Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates and Nick Shalna. We've got a three-peat here. I was gonna say not a three. I was gonna say something else, but this is a family show.
Boy, yeah.
So here we are. Nick, hi. Well, first, Chris, hi.
Oh, thanks. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Now,
Hi.
Nick, hi.
I feel like the guest should have gone first, and I feel added.
It's sort of like a seniority thing.
Oh,
You've got to
okay.
work your way up.
I
But
understand that.
yeah, you understand. You're in the church. You know how this works.
Yeah, hierarchy.
You know, Dr. Chris is he's a senior pastor at a church,
And
Yeah.
he also has a doctorate.
and has a doctorate. And I don't want to make a big deal about it, but last I checked, Nick, you were a youth pastor,
I'm
Which
not even a
is-
real pastor.
which is a very important role, and yet you do not sign anybody's checks or anything.
Yeah.
like that.
Well, that does actually make him, in some regard, the resident expert for today.
Yes.
You know? So-
Indeed. Thank you for keeping us on track, Dr. Chris. Today, we have a teen Bible study Bible. I have yet to be able to do this correctly.
Teen study Bible study.
Teen study Bible study. Yes, this is, our fourth one now?
I think it is, yeah.
I think so too. And we figured that it was only right that we got a true blue working youth pastor to help guide us through the source material. If this is your first teen study Bible study, I'll just illuminate you for a moment. In 1992, Zondervan, you know them, they make all your Bibles. They came out with a very special print of the Bible that had within it extra texts, non-canonical pages that were prompts to sort of help teens specifically, apply biblical concepts to their lives, and not in sort of a high and mighty, abstract, sort of theological, academic way, but in the ways that, say, a youth pastor might, putting its hat on backwards, turning around a folding chair, straddling that folding chair, and just being a cool guy, Nick, you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, putting Happy Meals in a blender. And is it called the teen? Is it called the teens? What is it? The teen study Bible.
Teen study Bible.
So this could be the teen study Bible study. If we're doing, if we're studying the Bible, or are we studying the teen?
Yes, but I don't think we've ever officially locked down how exactly to say this. The teen
It
study
is the teen
Bible.
study Bible study. We're studying
I
from
think
the
there's
teen
an extra
study
Bible in there. I think it's teen
Yeah,
study
yeah.
Bible study.
For a doctor, maybe you should. Do you know the etymology of study or entertainment?
I do know it for entertain. I don't know it for study off the top of my head. Entertain, I'm glad that you asked. Getting into it, that is the topic for today. We'll get to it here in just a minute.
Oh, I spoiled
An
it?
excerpt from the page.
Sorry.
But,
Just
entertainment.
Just a moment. We do need to officially introduce Nick Shalna. For those who don't remember, we just have too much fun with Nick. We get off track. Nick Shalna, thank you for being here. He's a youth pastor over at Countryside Baptist in Clearwater, Florida, and also the podcast host of the podcast, believe it or not, Universe Next Door, which is a very cool podcast with lots of very interesting minutes and hours of audio for you to listen to, and we recommend everybody go listen to it. Did I miss anything, Nick?
No, but next week we are having a woman who she worked inside of Scientology.
A woman?
A woman. No, just hear me out. And she worked inside of Scientology, and she enrolled John Travolta, worked with all that stuff. So we get to hear about the craziness that goes on inside of Scientology. She's now a Christian.
Way. That is awesome.
So I'm excited about that.
We're just going to make a habit out of sort of stealing all of your guests after
getting his
leftovers. Yes. Well, just give us your leftover guests, because that sounds really cool. So everybody go make sure to check out the Universe Next Door on your podcast players. Nick, I'll now give you a moment to actually officially say hi.
Hello. Thank you for having me on. And by the way, with the etymology joke, Chris Gates is like, or what are you on the show? You have a name on the show, don't you, that you go by?
Me?
No, Gates. I'm supposed to say it a certain way, right?
He's just Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates,
So
or baby doctor.
So Doctor
Reverend Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates, PhD.
So Reverend Baby Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates, head pastor, PhD, is one of the most intelligent people I know. So I actually thought you might know the etymology, because you're always the guy who's like, this is the etymology, and it's like, wow, I didn't know that.
Well, I did look it up, since I didn't know, and I have it sitting in front of me. Of study. Entertain, I was ready for that one, but study, you caught me off guard. But it is actually from the Latin studium, and it has something akin to zeal, a zealousness, and some kind of painstaking application is where the etymology comes from. So, yes, some kind of passionate and painful process by which, apparently we're gaining information. So
that has a lot more
study.
It has a lot more, I don't know, it makes it sound much more exciting, much more sort of a deep existential part of life, this studying, which is not quite the experience I ever had with it.
Yeah.
So I'm already changed here now, 7 minutes into the podcast.
Yeah. On a weird, not to get too far off on it, but on a weird kind of, philosophical level, I think people study, everybody studies something. Mm-hmm. We all, when you think about it, devote a lot of time and effort into observing and learning and being able to interact in a meaningful way with any number of things in our lives. I guess when it comes to different types of literature and research and things like that, that's where we usually think of studying. But we study, people. If you're married, you study your spouse, study whatever, anything that you're into. People that are into video games. My nephew, who is with us, he's into Fortnite. I don't mean for this to get way off, but we are talking about entertainment. But I just recently hopped onto Fortnite to kind of like play with him while we were on vacation.
Good for you.
Oh gosh, there's a lot going on in that. Have you guys ever played Fortnite? It's like a whole world of things. It's crazy. It's a real time suck.
That's when you know your generation is getting old, when your peer says, "Have you played Fortnite? There's a lot going on in there." Well, I think this brief aside of study as a term is very interesting, because in that context, I would say a lot of us study entertainment. We give a lot of attention to it. We pay very close attention to it. And in some ways, we are absorbing, studying entertainment more then we are studying perhaps our school work or something, says the guy who doesn't have a PhD. And as we were talking about the Teen Study Bible, the inside of this Bible, there are inserts that were added by the very radical editors over at Zondervan in the early 90s, which cover different topics, things like self-image, money, and in this case, this week, we'll be visiting the page labeled entertainment. And as usual, we've got just a magnificent display of early 90s graphic design, filled with gradients and geometric shapes that make little to no sense next to each other. We've got, let's see, stars, lots of stars on this page. I guess that is because it is entertainment, and that has something to do with stars. And look, we could all pick up a dictionary or pick up our phone or go to the internet and look up the definition of entertainment. But in the early 1990s, we could not do that. So Zondervan supplied for us a definition that they would like us to work off of for this study. Are you ready, Dr. Chris and Nick?
Ready.
I think I'm
Let's
ready.
do it.
Entertainment, it says. Entertainment. Noun. A performance or show designed to amuse or divert. Now, Nick, you might not know this, but the radical dudes over at Zondervan also provide an alternate definition.
In case you don't like the first one?
In case you don't like the first one, in case the first one is too complicated for the tiny squirrel brain of a teen in the 1990s. And the alternate definition given here is movies, TV, music, radio, definitely not dad singing in the shower.
Gosh. Oh.
First thoughts.
That's not entertaining.
I was going to say, it's pretty entertaining. It may not be good, but it may be
Depends who
entertaining.
your dad is.
I'm gonna jump in real quick and then toss it over to our resident expert here today. But because we were doing etymologies, entertain is it's a very interesting etymology, and coming from the Latin, and it essentially is two different words, inter and tenere. I think I'm getting that right, and it is to hold among. So it is having something to do with captivating the attention, of a person. It's holding a person kind of captive, almost, if you will. That is entertainment. And what I think is really kind of fun, there's this other word that they use there in the definition, to amuse. And amuse, the etymology there, it's kind of actually an easy one to consider if you just think about it for a moment. Muse is the word for, to think, to ponder, to consider. You muse, you think over these things. And then, of course, anytime you have an in front of words, often, not anytime, but often, that is a negation. So amuse actually etymologically means to not think.
Whoa.
So when you are being amused, you are essentially turning your brain off and kind of staring, dumbly at something, and just kind of letting someone else do the thinking for you, I suppose, in a certain regard. Now, that's not to say that there aren't certain types of entertainment that really do engage your mind, but it's just, etymologies are always funny because it's interesting to think, how did we come up with this word, and when the word was crafted, what did they have in their mind about this sort of thing, and how, of course, language evolves over time, and sometimes the etymology doesn't really do a whole lot to give you any kind of meaning. But that's where we're at with those two words. So
that's pretty heavy. Those are two pretty heavy etymologies. I mean,
yes.
Sort of the
being held captive to not think.
Yeah, right. Sort of, yeah. There's a degree of sort of control over another being if you're entertaining them or amusing
Programming
them. It's kind
even.
of got like either a hypnosis or some sort of, it's very, I don't know how I feel about that, but I'm sure Nick has some thoughts about that. What are your first thoughts here, Nick?
Yeah, my first thoughts is that etymology is incredibly interesting. To think that we're sort of shutting off our minds and just staring and gazing at something, which a lot of the times that's what it is. I mean, maybe not only that. There's a lot of, like you mentioned, a lot of entertaining things that you can do and also be learning from and thinking about. And it's interesting to me that when I zoom in, first of all, this page really speaks to me. I like how you pointed out the shapes and the stars and the colors. There's a quote that they put on this page talking about movies where they say, teens in a Florida honors English class wrote reviews on films they liked. The more violent and bloody the films, the higher these 11th graders rated them, which is not really surprising because it's weird that we have this sort of desire to see things die, I think sometimes, which probably is a result of the fall. But yeah, this is insane.
Yeah. Well,
I didn't know that about the etymology.
I want to also note, for my own purposes, if you look at the font of the big word entertainment at the top of the page, it's sort of like a proto Netflix font. It's kind of the elongated, tall block letters. It's really freaking me out, actually, now that I look at it. What if Netflix got their font from the Teen Study Bible? So, let's get into it. Entertainment. Now, like the alternate definition talks about here, we're talking movies, we're talking TV, music, radio. I think it's funny. It's the early 90s. They don't mention video games. They don't mention podcasts, but we can kind of put all of that stuff in there. Now, growing up in the church, there was a very intense focus as a young person, even before becoming a teenager, but certainly intensified during that time. Very intense focus on be very, very careful. Very, very careful what you let into your eye gates. The movies you watch, the music you listen to, which I find it's interesting now because I think in general, the entertainment available to any teen sitting in their bedroom nowadays vastly outnumbers and outranks in every metric the entertainment that was available to any random teen in the 90s. Even just the concept of the internet being easily accessible pretty much makes that number of entertainment avenues bordering infinite. Whereas, in the early 90s, you had your magazines, and you had, if you were a cool kid with questionably responsible parents, you had a TV in your room, which had maybe 80 channels of cable if you had a good cable package. But a lot of attention and a lot of energy going into teaching young people to sort of self-censor the entertainment that they partake of, and a lot of energy and a lot of sort of spiritual weight put on. I'll just use the word, a sort of morality attached to, if you partake of this kind of entertainment that is immoral, perhaps it's a rap song or a violent movie or something like that. And I remember, being a young person, feeling a sort of alternating between an intense desire to watch and listen to the same things that my peers were, perhaps at public school, or this intense desire to do what I was told is what God wants, which is for me to not listen to early 90s R&B and rap music, which I was very good at avoiding, by the way. Now, What was your what? I'll just open the table. That will open the. I'm opening the table. Did you know that this table was actually a door? Boom.
It's like a folding table.
Yeah. And I'm curious what you guys like. Kind of starting it off there. What do you think about kind of the moral and ethical implications of, of restricting the entertainment that you partake in? And I'll say, let's just talk about like mainstream socially acceptable entertainment. Anybody have any feelings about this?
I do.
I'll start with Chris.
Thanks. I was gonna let our guest go first, but
well, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I thought I was
that's
third
okay.
in all things.
Yeah, well, good. You know your place.
Okay.
I'm kidding. It's really interesting because when you open this up, I thought back to my teenage years, and I remember I grew up in a Christian home, and my parents, tried to steer me in the right direction as far as the types of entertainment that I had, and whether it was, video games, movies, whether it was music, those sorts of things. I can remember pretty much at every juncture there was some place where my mom was saying, yeah, you shouldn't be watching that, or not, you shouldn't be, you're not going to, you're not allowed to watch that, not allowed to play that game. Some of you who, if you're my age, getting close to 40 or around there, you might remember the classic video game Mortal Kombat.
Yeah.
Of course, it's still around, I think, in its 11th iteration now, after all these years. But, it was like one of the greatest fighting games ever made at the time. If you were into that, you had Street Fighter and basically Mortal Kombat for a long time. And then Mortal Kombat, of course, just full of blood and all kinds of really kind of evil and twisted stuff and demons in it. And some of the characters, like lived in hell and, kind of crazy stuff. But it was, you're like, whatever, it's just a game, but my mom hated it. Wasn't allowed to play that. Then we had, of course, the music we were listening to. And this kind of is going to play into the larger point, I think, that really probably a lot of people think and understand, but I'm going to use a personal example here. In that, I was listening to music that was secular, in nature, and just throw some of the names out there. One of the first ones that really captivated me when I was in middle school, 6th grade, I think. If you guys remember the band Bush.
Yeah.
They had that song that came out, Machine Head. That was back, I think it must have been around 92 or 4 or something, right around the time this Teen Study Bible was printed.
You were a Bush guy?
The first two albums I was super into.
Wow.
Only for a little while until, and I remember my mom, she kind of, it's like you're hiding the CDs from her, whatever, and you're listening to them in your Discman. And whatever, sneak them wherever you can. I mean, now today you can almost not monitor what kids are getting into. Back in the day, you still had to drive to the record store and go buy a hard copy of it, and the evidence was always floating around in your room somewhere. Anyhow, I started listening to that, and then that was kind of like, it was a gateway into, if you will, I started eventually listening to the band Tool. Who still, even as awful and as blasphemous as they are incredibly talented, and I still have this kind of soft spot in my heart for the work that they do. Obviously not the message, but the music that they create. But they have, some songs that they're just like blasphemous, and obviously I have no tolerance for that. Somehow or another, I excuse it away. Yeah.
Only because you mentioned Tool, and actually I was thinking in my head while you were talking about Bush that when I was younger, I was a big Tool fan. And like you said, they're incredibly talented. They have very unique sound, but they have a lot of lyrics that are directly anti-Christian. And I remember that I was going to go to the Tool concert when they came to Tampa with a friend. It was like $100, and I was going to go, and then I felt convicted because I was a brand new Christian at the time, probably less than a year in. And that was actually one of the first times I chose Christ over something worldly that I loved as a new believer, because I ended up giving the $100 to church or whatever it was. I'm just such a great man, but I ended up not going to the concert because it was like, it was motivating to think like, as a new believer with this new life, like I can make a decision for Christ. Like I can actually decide not to do something that my heart sinfully desires to do. Not to say that anyone who's gone to a Tool concert's evil, but
I'm
yeah,
glad
it's
glad
funny
you're not saying that.
Yeah,
Because I've seen them probably like six or so times, and even for old time's sake here, just recently went to a show with my brothers to kind of it was in Orlando, the place that we saw them first, and we kind of relived that experience. But in their message is a lot of new age kind of enlightenment sort of material, and then they really talk a lot about, particularly in their second studio album, they talk a lot about drug use and expanding your mind through psychedelics. And it was actually in listening to their music that it started to put this desire into my heart and into my mind to try these drugs that they're talking about in their songs. And this is when I've been, I believe, a believer. I was actually just talking about it on Sunday at church from a very young age, and I struggled with assurance about that until I was probably in my mid-teens, but then felt really sure about my salvation, but then spent some time still going out into the world and kind of seeing what the world had to offer. And part of that was I experimented with a lot of drugs when I was in like junior and senior year of high school, and then even like my freshman year of college right after that. So between 17 and 19, did a lot of drugs. And I can say that one of the cautions, that my mother was giving me all these years ago is, if you start listening to this stuff, if you let all of this stuff into your mind and into your heart, then it has an effect on you. And I remember having the conversation, and I'm like, she doesn't even know what she's talking about. It's just music. It's not going to have any effect. And then I started to look back, and I was like, what prompted me to get involved, with using all of these drugs? And I mean, I had some friends, obviously, that were doing it and that were part of it. But also, to be perfectly honest, the music that I was listening to, all of this stuff that it's just pounded into your mind over and over and over again, it eventually bears fruit in some regard. So kind of going back to where Basil was opening the question, with our parents kind of trying to monitor those things when we were teenagers. And now, of course, I'm a parent, and of course little Simon is not yet capable of making any decision about what he's wanting to watch or anything like that. But I'm already starting to be cautious about the things that I'm exposing him to, even passively. Like I don't even want some bad music or movie going on in the background right now when, I don't know how much he can perceive. I don't know how much of that is actually going into his mind and impacting his soul in some way. So there's a real conversation to be had there for sure. I think it's foolish for any of us to say that we're beyond the influence of these forms of entertainment that we expose ourselves to. They're going to have an influence. I mean, you can't. It's reminding me of Jesus in Matthew 6.
Stop it. You're sounding like my parents in the early 90s.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, he says that the eye is it's the lamp of the body, right? That what's coming in through your eye holes has an effect on what's going on in your soul, and it is scriptural. So there you have it.
You got that out of your system now, Chris. You got it out of your system.
Were you talking about your third eye? Or
yes.
No, well, it's funny because I actually had a similar experience to you, and later I realized that like when you don't have Christ, all these other guys, like for me it was like the Doors and Tool and a ton of other bands, but it's almost as though they become your God because you can't live without a God. And so
let me interject here, because when I did go to the Tool concert that you didn't go to, I probably was at one of the ones that you didn't, because I have seen them in Tampa, but when I did go, this was the first time I had this experience. You were saying that they were your gods. I was very much a believer and held Christ dearly in my heart at this point in my life, but I was still, experimenting with drugs and things like that. And I think at this particular concert, this is not an endorsement to anyone listening. And I don't know what people might think about me out there, but you're about to. Here's the real truth.
Thanks for the
I was on mushrooms. I took some psychedelic mushrooms at the concert, and quite an experience. And we were sitting around, and I'm sitting in this group of all of these people, and kind of like really considering what's going on and what I'm doing here, and why am I here, and having one of those real deep existential moments that you have if anybody's had any exposure to psychedelics, you know what happens. And they get done with this one song. I don't remember particularly which one, but what I do remember is everybody's going crazy, cheering and clapping and screaming and like heaping all of this adulation towards these people. And it just struck me. I was like, this is a worship service. Like, this is like what we do in church, except, we don't get quite that excited in church. We perhaps should for our Lord, but they were heaping praise and worship onto these four guys that were standing on this stage, and it, like, the idolatry of the whole thing just came crashing down on me. So yes, Nick, that was just to kind of bolster the point that you were making, that yes, when you are without a God, when you don't have Jesus seated on the throne of your heart, then you're bound to worship something else. You're going to be worshiping something, and people find it, a lot of times in these entertainers. And I had a profound experience of that. I witnessed it firsthand, and I thought, wow, they're worshiping these guys right now. And in a lot of ways too, I think that's plays into selling your soul and those sorts of things, and demons kind of coming in and trying to receive the praise that's due to God. And perhaps, like Beyonce says, she goes into a trance and Sasha Fierce comes in and takes over her body. And sometimes I wonder, is this not a demon inhabiting a person and then receiving praise that God should be? And then sometimes people just receive it. Anyway,
okay.
I'll hand it back to you, Nick. I just wanted to add that.
Nick, oh my gosh. Nick, I'm going to let you say one more thing about Tool. And if anybody brings up Tool one more time in this podcast, we're just going to have to change the name of the podcast. It's not even going to be a Teen Study Bible Study. It's going to be the Tool Hour with the Tool
lovers.
The three Tool bros. The two Tool bros and the one other guy.
Toolbox.
The Toolbox. All right, Nick, tell me about Tool one more time, and then I have something to say to both of you.
No, I can't think of anything to say about Tool. I feel pressured. I feel like
it's your last
I can't speak
man.
freely. I can't speak my mind.
After this, no more Tool.
Well, okay. If we need another Tool reference, when I read that page from the Teen Study Bible Study page, I was actually I thought of Tool, that song that says "I need to watch things die from a safe distance," and it's like, oh, they're doing it again. They're getting in there again. So that Tool.
Okay.
There you go.
The Tool moratorium is now in place. The next part of the page, and I have something to say. The next part of the page here is a quote, and it's sort of trying to get into the head of a teen, okay? And it goes like this, quote, "My parents don't understand. They won't let me listen to K-Buzz. They won't let me rent this movie I want to see or buy that group CD. Hey, don't my mom and dad trust me? Besides, just because I watch something doesn't mean I'll go and do it, Christopher." Now,
I guess I beat him to the punch on that one already, didn't I?
Here is one thing about my experience growing up in the church and being blessed with the opportunity to have more interaction with the Bible than probably most adults by the time I was reading this page in the Team Study Bible, which is, Mom and Dad, I get it. You don't want me to have a bad influence. I'm not like that bad kid at church, Christopher, who takes drugs at a Tool concert just because Tool thinks it's cool. In fact, Mother and Father, why don't I quote to you Mark 7:15? Nothing outside a person can defile them by going into them. Rather, it is what comes out of a person that defiles them. Mom. What do you say about that, Nick?
Yeah, well, it's interesting that obviously we're sinful by nature. But even though we talked about that etymology of entertainment earlier, that you're kind of sitting there, what was the second word about like not paying attention? What's the proper word?
Amuse.
Amuse?
Not think.
Not think. If you're just amused and not thinking, the stuff is actually still influencing you. I had a mentor years ago who told me a story. He was talking about like if you had a home and people started bringing like trash bags full of garbage into your house and started piling them up, it's like you'd be like, what's going on? You wouldn't let them in. And he said, well, then why would you let them bring it into your mind? And because it's like even if you don't think you're consciously paying attention, it exists to influence you. I mean, Hollywood's one of the biggest ways to influence people in the country, and so is music. A lot of music obviously comes out of Hollywood, but it's going to influence you even if you don't recognize it. And there's a certain point where it's not as though we're sinners because of what comes from the outside, but we're going to be influenced by what comes from the outside, and that's going to fuel our sin, and we're going to continue to sin. It wasn't C.S. Lewis, I don't remember who it was, but they said we're not sinners because we sin because we're sinners. So our sinfulness comes from the inside, but we're certainly influenced, and that can certainly motivate our sin. And that's what the whole idea of temptation is. I mean, if you couldn't be influenced by the outside, then there's really no such thing as temptation.
Hey, man, I'm just reading the words of Jesus, and I have yet to hear a good retort to Mark 7:15.
Well, Mark, the context of Mark 7, he's talking about...
Don't get into this context hullabaloo, Chris.
Well, that's what we do
Just
here.
let me quote the Bible out of context, please.
Well, I mean, it's not out of context yet, but the context is it has to do with purity laws in, Israel, essentially. And the Old Testament was always pointing to to Jesus, to the new covenant that was coming, right? So it's a picture of what is to come. So all of the purity laws that are going on and the sacrificial system and all of that essentially is only pointing us to Jesus. It actually isn't doing anything, and we're told this in Hebrews. It says that the blood of rams and of goats and lambs, it can't take away sin. It never could, and that blood never did take away any sin, but it stood in as a representation for what would come and take away our sin. And Jesus is getting to this point when he's talking about that, and he's saying in regard to these laws of cleanliness it's just a picture pointing us to what God's idea of purity and cleanliness looks like, and that is, he's not exaggerating it in the Old Testament law, but he's putting it into practical terms that we can see. This is why we have all the laws of what's clean and unclean. So what he's saying is the truth of it is that doesn't make you unclean. It doesn't make you unclean if you eat, an unclean food, and he talks about it, and he says it goes into the stomach, and then out the body, basically. And he's saying it doesn't enter into a man's heart or into a soul. There are things that can enter into your heart and that can enter into your soul that do essentially make you unclean. But what he's talking about is the thing that comes out
is what defiles them. For it is from within, out of a person's heart, that evil thoughts come. Sexual immorality, theft, murder, adultery, greed, malice, deceit, lewdness, envy, slander, arrogance, and folly. All these evils come from inside and defile a person. And I'm going to, that was 20 through 23. Now, I'm going to continue to push back on you guys because a whole podcast about how watching a bad movie can influence you, I don't think is going to challenge anybody's notions about entertainment. But what of the idea that, I would actually sincerely make the argument, Chris, that you did not take drugs because you listened to Tool. I think you were going to take drugs anyways, and you happened to be listening to Tool.
Perhaps.
Because you were a teenager hanging out with other teenagers. It's not Tool that brought the mushrooms into your life. Of course, perhaps having the influence of Tool, created less barriers, or perhaps even this, amused you, made you not think before, ultimately making the decision, because these decisions come from within the fallen state of our heart. So I don't think there's any argument that the entertainment that we partake in will influence us. But is that influence really making us do things we don't already have within us? Or perhaps is it dulling the senses that help us, regulate our behavior from acting upon the darkness of our heart? I mean, there has to be some more complexity in here than what we were being told in the 90s.
Yeah, well,
I want to know what Nick has to say.
Let me come back with this, and then I'll toss it over to Nick, because it's a good point that you're making. And I was thinking about it too, because in the context of Mark 7, what he is saying is that the sinful condition of a person's heart really is what causes a person to be unclean, right? It is the sinfulness that is inborn in every single one of us. However, that it is amplified and it is magnified when there is exposure to other sorts of sinful behaviors, when there is temptation.
Where is that coming from? What do you mean it's magnified?
Right here, listen to this. This is in James chapter 1. In James chapter 1, in verse 13, he's talking about temptation, and he says, "No one, when they're tempted, should say that God is tempting me, for God cannot be tempted by evil, nor does he tempt anyone. But each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desires. And then after desire has conceived, it gives birth to sin, and sin, when it is full grown, gives birth to death." So he's talking about this process by which essentially the desires of a person's heart, when they are entertained, when you entertain the evil desires that are already inside of your heart, they give birth to action, and then that action ultimately results in death.
So what I'm hearing,
you have
and
to
I
hold
think
this
what everybody
intention.
else is hearing, is Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates is saying that I had a pretty good point.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah. I wouldn't disagree with that.
Wait, your point being the Bible verse?
My point being that, whatever effect that we're regulating the morality of partaking in some form of entertainment is not that it creates something or a desire or a temptation that isn't already there. Okay? It is that, perhaps in the entertainment, the capture, the spell that it puts us under, or the amusement, the not thinking state that is sort of induced with, I would say, almost all entertainment, but let's say specifically ones that have a certain influence that y'all are so afraid of. In the not thinking, that is when the sort of process, the everyday process of resisting temptation, if you're not thinking, entertained, amused, then you're kind of on autopilot and allows that with it, which is already within the sinful heart, express itself in behavior. I just don't think that Dr. Chris took drugs because he listened to Tool. I think Tool perhaps created a mental state, perhaps even a spiritual or emotional state, where the resistance against such temptations was hampered or dampened, or perhaps not even there at all, being that he was so distracted by the cool tunes of Tool.
I just want to point out that you're breaking your own moratorium right now.
Now, and only I'm
Tool
allowed
lover.
to talk about Tool, okay? Because I actually was never. I couldn't name a Tool song if my life depended on it right now.
This is so hard because there's so much I want to say in response,
Don't
but I
even
also want to give
think
Nick a
about
chance
it.
to talk.
You're not allowed to say it. This is
I'm
the
gonna try to
temptation
come
that we're
back
talking
to it.
about. Do not let the darkness of Tool that is already within you come out of your mouth, for it will defile you.
I'm gonna let our guest speak.
Yeah.
What say you,
but
Nick?
there's also Genesis 4, where, of course, this is at the point where sin has already come into the world, but it says that sin is crouching at your door. It wants to have its way with you, which I think is a pretty good translation. Like, sin desires you, and it can only desire you because you desire it. And when you think about it, like Paul would have spent plenty of time in places that were considered defiled. He would have been around all kinds of idols and false gods and everything, but he wasn't affected by any of them. It wasn't something that he had desired. And so, yeah, I had a friend who was a reptile enthusiast. I've never met more than one
Glad
of them.
he added enthusiast.
Yeah, he was a reptile. He was a furry. But no, but he had told me one time the difference between a venomous creature and a poisonous creature. And he had told me that I had no idea. He told me a poisonous creature is like those poisonous frogs in South America or whatever. They're dependent on their diet in order to be poisoned. So if they had one as a pet or wherever, and they kept it in a tank and they didn't feed it those certain things, it wouldn't be harmful. It wouldn't be poisonous. So that frog was only poisonous because of what it consumes, because of its diet. And on the other hand, a venomous creature is a creature that is born with venom. Like, if you find a rattlesnake, it doesn't matter what it's eating, it's going to be venomous until it dies, unless the venom's extracted. And so we're venomous creatures. Sin is in us. We're born with a sinful nature. I don't know if this is a debate or not, if anybody disagrees, but we're sinful by nature. Paul says we're children of wrath by nature in Ephesians 2. Of course, he was conceived in iniquity, David, and so we're sinful by nature. So we're, of course, influenced by what's outside of us. That's where the temptation pulls us, and I think this is what you said, Basil. But of course, it's our desire. So when baby Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates, senior pastor, was at the Tool concert, he may not have done drugs that night if he wasn't at the Tool concert, but he still, of course, had that desire in his heart. And while we're now no longer under the punishment of sin, we still have to deal with sin, obviously. In our lifetime, even as Christian believers, we're still going to have to deal with temptation and these desires until our body is taken and restored and glorified. And so, but I think we're all in agreement.
Here's a question that I have, and I'm going to let Nick come at this one first before Chris gets too excited and talks about Tool again. So, the original sort of example that I was giving about this, and we got to move on to more pieces of this page here in a second. I was more trying to describe, I think, what the misstep or the miscommunication that can happen, and I feel not just by parents, but also by the church and by youth pastors, Nick, is the moralization of simply consuming a piece of media. There was, neighbor kids that I had in my neighborhood who specifically would listen to certain types of music. Like Limp Bizkit was an example. And Korn with a K. I know, Korn. That's how you knew they were bad kids. And, it was described to me in youth group that the very act of partaking of this kind of entertainment, partaking in this music, sort of labeled them. It was already a moral failing to listen, to partake of certain types of entertainment. And now, look, we're all grown adults here. I'm not even trying to get either of you to disagree with my youth pastor live on a podcast. Although when you do, I will send it to that youth pastor and say, listen to this. I got a PhD in biblical interpretation to say you're wrong. But the idea that, these kids were inherently bad kids because of what they listened to, or because of what they watched, or because of whatever. They could have been the sweetest kids in the world, and in fact, no, they weren't the sweetest kids in the world. But the point is that it wasn't the very act. I have a problem with the characterization of that, where if if I told you that I was just listening to Tool right before this podcast or whatever, and the characterization of the person who takes in that kind of media has a moral failing, was taught, and what we're doing here is sort of trying to examine the Teen Study Bible as it was an influence in the lives of millions of now millennial adults, but in their teen years. This is what crafted the millennial generation's idea of what it means to be Christian, what it means to be, a righteous person, if indeed that was even the main concern in the church. And I would argue that it maybe wasn't necessarily. But things like that. Is this making sense to you, Nick? Youth pastor Nick? I'm trying to find some closure
I think so.
With you.
Yeah, I don't know if we're on the same page if I say this, but I do think that the church, especially in our country, and especially over the last 30 or 40 years or so, has focused way too much on morality and way too little on the gospel. And when I say too much on morality, I'm not promoting antinomianism. I'm not saying we don't care about morals, we don't care about doing right. But people are not going to be saved by trying to do the right thing. They're not going to be saved by trying to be good. I think that a huge emphasis in my youth group and in my church is the gospel. It's like that's the only way you're coming to Christ. And when you come to Christ, well, now we're saved in order to do good works. We're saved in order to serve God. We're saved in order to say, I don't know if I should do this thing or that thing, but none of that is going to save us, and none of that is going to make us righteous. The only thing that'll make us righteous is the righteousness given to us through faith in Christ. And then on just what we should and shouldn't do, of course, in 1 Corinthians 10, Paul talks about having the right to do anything, but not everything is beneficial. Not everything is profitable. Right. And so my thing is, like, I wouldn't tell my students what they can and can't watch. One of the big things is always Harry Potter. Should we not watch Harry Potter? Should we watch it? And it's like I don't know. Ask your parents. I think that we have the right to do anything, but you should ask yourself, is it profitable in my Christian walk? Is it going to glorify God? And if you can answer those things with a clear conscience, like Paul could when he was telling people, go ahead and eat the meat sacrificed to idols because those idols don't exist, well, that's okay. Well, then go ahead. If you can do it with a clear conscience and you think it's glorifying God, then I would probably leave it at that and not spend too much time on not going on Instagram or not going on whatever. I actually brought my students to a camp a couple years ago, and it was funny because they did like a whole teaching on like, don't use Instagram, don't use TikTok, don't listen to Taylor Swift. And then at the end they put the thing up where it's like, hey, add our camp on Instagram. And it's like, well, how come you guys get to use Instagram,
right,
but not the students? And so we can't just cut everything out of our lives. Of course, if there's something that really is tempting and dangerous to you, well then yeah, cut it out of your life. It's better that you honor Christ, but I think we have to use biblical wisdom in every situation as believers.
Have you seen it's not quite a meme, but it's an image. Speaking of Instagram, there's lots of great Christian meme accounts you should follow. But there's an image you could tell it's kind of like a bigger, like mega church type of church, in a big, youth group sanctuary. And on the projection screen, it says something to the effect of, you want to honor God in every way, Everybody take out your phones and unfollow 3 people who do not honor God with their with their content or whatever. And it is almost dystopian in sort of a spirit.
Yeah.
In a sort of like, I don't know, just kind of like a spiritual dystopia where the act of unfollowing someone on Instagram is sort of the prompt to serve the Lord. Which, you know, I get the value in what they were trying to do, but it really brought me back to a lot of the youth group experiences, where a lot of times it really is that. It's like, oh, you want to make God happy? Don't listen to Tool. Oh, you want to make God happy? Unfollow Ninja, the gamer, on Instagram because he doesn't honor God, something like that. I mean, you're a youth group pastor. You're a youth pastor. Is this, am I blowing your mind here, or is this just part of youth pastoring? Sort of these easy to accomplish, almost, I want to say examples. It's not quite examples. It's like training almost. They're like little training exercises more than they are like big spiritual concepts. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I would agree 100%. And it's just like in Luke 6 when the Pharisees don't want Jesus to heal on the Sabbath, and he asks them, is it better to do good on the Sabbath or is it better to do evil? And so he doesn't ask, is it better to do good or to do nothing? He considers nothing in that situation evil. And so I was going somewhere with that and I can't remember where it was. Let me pull up Luke chapter 6. I had a good point.
Is that the one with the ox stuck in a ditch or something? Do you leave the...
No. This is the one where the man has a withered hand. But anyway, so long story short, the Pharisees, and like we brought up in Mark 6 as well with washing your hands, the Pharisees were really good at not keeping God's actual law and creating their own laws that were really easy to keep. So it's like, yeah, well, I'm going to have adultery I'm going to commit adultery, or I'm not going to honor God, or I'm going to be angry when you heal this man on the Sabbath, but I washed my hands today, which is not a biblical law. And so I think we could very easily do that same thing. We can try to create these little laws and these rules that are so easy to keep, but it's like we're actually ignoring what God actually wants us to do, and we're actually ignoring the gospel, which is the only way to salvation. So I don't know if that's kind of what you're getting at, but I certainly think it's easier to keep our own rules than it is to honor God.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm not exactly sure what I was even saying, but I think you make a good point, and I think that's kind of like where the heart of a lot of these references that we're pulling from Scripture apply to the entertainment thing. Me trying to talk about the inherent moral failings of partaking of a certain type of entertainment. It feels like, and both of you can correct me if you disagree, it feels like it is one of these things where, as a young person, sure, we all need a little bit of guidance and, instruction in how to regulate our own ecosphere of temptation. When you're a young person, certainly inhibitions are radically stunted compared to those of, some sort of imaginary adult, perfect regulation of intake of entertainment and influence. But, as a teen, you're so subject to so many different influences in entertainment, and have very little reference for stopping yourself from partaking in a piece of entertainment upon your own sort of instruction, your own will, knowing this is not good for me, I'm just not going to partake in this. Instead, you kind of just take in whatever is cool, whatever your friends are taking in, and then you're just sort of at the whim of that. So I can see how these little exercises in self-regulation could be used more of a teaching instrument, implement in getting a teen used to making choices about their entertainment versus an outright prohibition. Now, I still don't think it's a very good idea to place some sort of moral value judgment on a person based on the music that they listen to, but I think we can all agree with that.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I think
definitely.
so as I've been biting my tongue and
You've
listening
been
here,
doing such a good job, Chris. Can I
Yeah,
just
well,
give
it's
you
over.
recognition for that? I'm very
Thanks.
proud of you.
Yeah. As I have been, going way back to 15 minutes ago now, I'm talking about the whatever the motivations or reasons or variables were that went into my drug consumption, since we're using me as an example here to dissect. I would agree with, I would say Basil, but I'm going to say I'll agree with the counsel of Scripture in that it is the sinfulness of a person's heart that motivates them into sinning. It is something that is, you can't blame anybody else, and that's kind of at the heart of this passage. You don't get to blame God when you're tempted. You don't get to blame anybody else. What James is saying is, when you stand before God and give an account for your life, you don't get to point a finger at anybody for anything and say, he made me do it, she made me do it, the devil made me do it, Tool made me do it. You don't get to say that to anybody. And that's not certainly at all what I was trying to do. However, as you were just kind of saying there, Basil, there are a multiplicity of variables that come into a person's life that cause them to make any decision that they make. We are the sum total of our life experiences, and it's something that I had thought about sometime when I do my best never to stand in judgment over somebody else about anything, because I had the profound thought one time where I was thinking, all things evenly considered, if I have been through the same experiences as any other person, and my mind had been shaped the same way that they had helplessly sometimes through things that are taught to me, things I observe, things that, passively are just put on me, I would probably make the same, I would make the same sorts of decision as another person if I were to have walked their whole life in those shoes to bring them up to that point. So there's all of those sorts of things that play into this that we can never know. But I think that it is not in overreach of youth pastors and parents to try and minimize the number of those sorts of influences, and to say there are already a world of things that are calling you outside of righteousness, outside of purity, outside of living in a way that's going to be honoring to God, that if there's any that we can do without, then it probably is beneficial for us to remove at least this one variable here. That's one less thing that's going to be calling you towards sin. Let's try to move this one away. I was thinking about this, and this is in Galatians. And just quick little context for Galatians, Paul's writing to the church at Galatia. He went, started a church there, gave them the gospel, had the Judaizers come back in, right? So Paul apparently preaches what we would understand to be the true and clear and efficient gospel message. And then these Judaizers come back in and say that you need Jesus, but you also still need the law. So you have these people in Galatia, and their theology, their worldview has been corrupted. It has been tainted by these false teachers that has come in. And this is what Paul says to them in Galatians chapter 5, verse 7. He says, "You were running so well. Who has obstructed you from obeying the truth?" So you, in your new version of theology here, it's sin. And he's telling them you're sinning because you have the wrong perspective about what it is that God requires. Such persuasion, he says in verse 8, does not come from the one who calls you. A little leaven works through the whole batch of dough. And what he's saying is these subtle teachings, these subtle ideas can get into a person's heart and mind and work their way through the whole thing. He goes on to talk specifically about circumcision because this is the issue that he's dealing with. But he picks up again in verse 16, and he says, "So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh craves what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. They are opposed to each other, so that you do not want what you want. But if you are led by the Spirit, you are not under the law." And what's going on? I mean, it's pretty common sense that our flesh desires sin. Our flesh, and you can call it your corrupted, fallen spirit or heart or sin nature or whatever it is, it desires sin. It desires what is contrary to what God wants. And the more that we feed in whatever way these ideas and these thoughts, these things that are contrary to what the Lord desires, the more opportunities we give to fuel those things, the more likely it is that we're going to fall into those behaviors as well. Paul says in 1 Corinthians 15:33, when he's talking to the church at Corinth, he says, do not be misled or do not be fooled. Bad company corrupts good character. If you have good character and you're hanging out with shady people all the time, you should not expect that your good character is going to rub off on them. More often than not, what happens is the bad company corrupts the good character. And you have instances like this over and over again. Ephesians 5:11 says, have nothing to do with the fruitless deeds of darkness, but rather expose them. So it's just a clear cut, like you see something evil that's going on, don't entertain it. Don't have anything to do with it. Call it evil and move on. Expose it for what it is. And I think that there's a lot there needs to be some kind of balance. But even as I'm thinking about the kind of silly example of the megachurch and them saying, go on your phone and unfollow 3 people, it's like, yeah, it's kind of ridiculous that's what we've been reduced to now. Like, that's a virtuous act in the eyes of the Lord. I was actually just talking on Sunday about fasting, and the fact that people now, fast from social media, like that's actually suffering for a person, or it's actually like, I'm really giving up something here because I'm not going onto social media. But unfortunately, it is. And unfortunately for some people, that is like an act of worship to the Lord. Like, I'm going to deny myself. I'm going to deny this, whatever verification that I need from people, or this, looking at other people's lives or whatever. And it actually does kind of have a hold on us. And while unfollowing 3 people on your Instagram or Facebook or whatever that aren't glorifying to God, while it's ridiculous that that's something that's being posted on a screen at a church, it's not something that's not worthwhile. It's not something that if in your feed you have stuff that is continually coming up that's not honoring to the Lord.
I understand the spirit of what you're saying, and I agree with the spirit of what you're saying. But I actually do think that is almost entirely in vain. And I'm just going to do a simple pushback on that. And I heard Nick make a noise over there, so I want to let Nick jump in. I might actually consider that entirely in vain. And I could, you gave a lot of scriptural references there, and I'm just going to let most of those sit. But the very reference to a little bit of leaven, works its way through the whole thing. Like I said, unfollowing 3 people on Instagram who do not glorify the Lord is a fun, quick exercise to make an example, give an example of one small step a teen can make in the right direction. I'll give them that. But that does not undo, I would say, any measurable amount of influence that is coming 24/7 through Instagram.
I'm not saying that it's like efficacious at all.
I know.
It's going to actually
That's what I'm saying.
bear
I like
any benefit
of what you're
but
saying.
It's not bad. Right.
It's not
a bad thing to do.
I think it might actually be bad, though.
Why would it be bad to unfollow people who are just going to be posting trash on their accounts?
Because
that you're being
it gives the
to?
illusion and the small sort of spiritual self-interested reward that I have done something.
Sure.
And I have done it, and I did that thing, and later on, when you might be thinking, I'm going to listen to Tool now. Should I listen to Tool? Well, I did. I have been a good boy. I've unfollowed 3 Instagram influencers that did not glorify
examples
the Lord,
here, by the way.
I will allow myself. Excuse me?
I said I need examples. I need examples.
No,
like,
I don't think you
who would
do.
the three
You
be
don't need
of?
examples. I'm just saying.
I'm wondering who your three would be. What three would you delete off of yours right now? If you had to?
I just follow Christian meme accounts. That's enough. You don't need anything.
Which three would you delete though of those Christian meme accounts?
Yeah,
of
yeah.
the Christian.
Is there a
Now we're
Bethel
getting
one?
down to the nitty gritty. Which ones are
I
offensive
could
to the
never.
Lord?
They all give glory to the Lord. I have a perfectly manicured Instagram feed of only Christian meme accounts that give glory to the Lord.
But don't you
and
think
all
that
you
making a
teens
Christian
should
meme
take me as an
isn't
example?
that an easy way?
What's
Isn't that an easy way? Isn't making a Christian meme just an easy way to glorify the Lord?
You have obviously never made an effective Christian meme. That is not easy work, my friend. We've got hard-working meme miners down in the meme mines in North or South or West Virginia. Anyways, so I'm just pushing back. Again, the spirit of what you're saying, Chris, I enjoy, but I do think that it can be unprofitable to use exercises like that in certain cases. Nick,
Yeah, well,
what do you got going on,
it's
Nick?
treating a symptom instead of the actual disease for
Nick's
certain.
turn.
I mean, it's putting a
My
Band-Aid.
turn, all right?
This is
on a
why we
head
can't have a
wound.
third chair.
It's
Yeah.
tough. It's
Third
tough.
means never, Dr. Gates.
All right.
I never
go
get
ahead.
a turn. I don't even remember what I was going to say. I don't remember what we're talking about now because I'm so worked up.
Let's move.
It's
so
okay. What
upset.
don't you think?
Upset Nick, Chris.
Oh my gosh.
In Galatians
Not the first
5, but Paul's talking about false teachers, right? Like a little yeast works through the whole, and just like Jesus talks about beware of the yeast of the Sadducees or the Sadducees and Pharisees, and they're like, I don't think we brought enough bread.
Right.
But don't you think he's talking about false teaching?
Yeah, well, and that's what I think that entertainment is.
See,
that's
this is why
what
you can't-
Tool is.
Okay,
Tool is
but-
false
Interesting.
teaching.
That's an interesting
but there-
concept.
But he
Everything
didn't
is
write
false teaching.
But but not everything.
That's not the
is in that.
gospel, is it not?
But but don't you think that when we talk about false teaching in Scripture, we're talking about teaching that is false coming from someone claiming to be an authority in the church specifically? Like we wouldn't go around talking about. Well, I guess you just did, but but you don't see in the Bible them just going and talking about everybody being a false teacher. It's like people who are trying to teach them doctrine about Christianity that isn't true.
Yeah.
Certainly.
That
is the
Nick.
immediate.
This is his zone. You've fallen right into his trap, Chris.
That is the immediate context, yes, of the passage, but that is in hermeneutics. It is
Wow.
what did it mean, and then now what does it mean?
Yeah,
so
well,
is
you were
it
pretty
can you take
specific about the context of Mark 7:15 there, Chris?
Right. Well, I was putting it in its context. I didn't say I disagreed with you. I was putting it in the context that it was referring to purity laws. Anyhow, I don't think that it's a stretch to say that ideas and some of those being theological, there's all kinds of crazy. We were talking about didn't we do a question and answer, Basil, something about all the stuff that's on TikTok, all of the crazy sorts of different religious ideas. They're being put in front of our faces in movies, all of the crazy esoteric sorts of thoughts and worldviews that are out there. It's in the music. It's all over the place. So it is, I don't think that you can be too careful or too cautious about the types of things that you're letting into your mind.
Absolutely. And
You're not going to change my mind on that.
This feels
I
like
agree with that.
has been your point since the beginning of the show, and I will repeat what I said at the beginning of the show, which is nobody is denying that the entertainment that we choose to partake in, will have some sort of influence there. My only pushback is, does getting rid of some of the influences make a big enough difference if, we are getting those influences from other places? Now, let me, this goes into it right here. For the sake of time, let me read a little bit more of this page, and I want to know what you guys think about it. So there's this spot here right in the middle. You've got a nice askew, for no reason, 45-degree angle paragraph here that says, everybody knows this month's top 10. They're referring to the radio music, folks. Everybody knows this month's top 10. Do you guys know this month's top 10?
No idea.
Okay,
No.
so you don't listen to the words, but one study showed that kids who don't listen to the words not only could sing the top 10, they could write the lyrics down. Yes, I think we all agree with that. Take movies. Teens in a Florida honors English class wrote reviews on films they liked. The more violent and bloody the films, the higher these 11th graders rated them. I think that is also undoubtedly true. We have, especially in the sort of pristine, sanitized world that we live in, where not a single one of us comes in contact with a dead person or any significant amount of gore in real life, Lord willing, that there is a strange fascination with that we cannot deny. And then it goes into this. Of course that's not you, dear teen. So here's a way to show mom and dad you can be trusted. So right off the bat here, the entertainment that you partake in happens to be inherently a matter of trust with your parents. Now, of course, your mom and dad will have set limits on what you're allowed and not allowed to have. That's totally normal and important and recommended, Chris. But at this point, you see the content of this Bible study page move not from here is why you should pay attention to the things that you let into your body or eyeballs or whatever, but that it is revolving around listening to your mom and dad. Now, if you look at the page as a whole, folks, you'll notice not one single explanation as to why you should not or you should partake of any sort of entertainment. All of this that we have gone through regarding what we should and shouldn't, and if we should or if we should not once is any of that mentioned. There's no teaching about, well, you should avoid sexually explicit content because of your, stage of life that you're in could reduce inhibitions and get you in trouble in certain ways. You should be watching out for violence because it's, whatever, could make your sinful soul crave violence and things like that, whatever the explanation should be. And the very first time that there's any sort of actual direction, it is, so here's a way to show mom and dad you can be trusted. Offer to let them watch that video before you see it. While you're driving together, ask them to turn on K-Buzz. I love this fictional radio station that they're working on here. Turn on K-Buzz to check out the disc jockey as well as the songs he or she plays. Mom, we gotta listen to K-Buzz to listen to the disc jockey. In time, mom and dad will learn to trust your judgment and give you more freedom. So it is entirely...
Is that a guarantee?
It is. There is a little star at the end of it, so it does inspire trust that they are giving me good advice here. And indeed, I think this is good advice. And indeed, I'm pretty sure I followed this advice very well as a kid. The problem is, as a teenager, you can earn the trust of your parents, and that is the perfect time to break the rules once you have earned their trust. But there's no sort of spiritual reasoning except for here is how you gain the trust of your mom and dad. I mean, am I the only one finding this a fascinating sort of page in a study Bible? There's very little actual, even the most simplistic sort of youth groupy reasoning. Like, what is the, there's no call to interchange. There's no explanation about how this entertainment can affect your relationship with God. There's not a lot of this. Nick, what do you think about that?
Yeah, I think this whole thing they wrap it up with your mom and dad will learn to trust you. But I think this whole thing is just a plea to get what you want.
Yes.
To get K-Buzz. What you want is K-Buzz, and it's going to happen. Like, and this is how you're going to do it. It's kind of like this whole, they get the flashy star, they get the Netflix font, they got the 45-degree font and everything, but that's what it's all for.
The whole page is to how to convince your mom and dad to not regulate your behavior and your entertainment intake anymore. Once they trust you, they'll stop checking
and once
on
you get your foot in the door,
yeah.
you list all the K-Buzz you want.
And the reason why this is so disturbing to me is because this is sort of one of the cornerstones of what it is to be a teen. First of all, is how to gain as much freedom as possible. And in this case, it is, I mean, maybe it just shows the darkness in my own heart, but when I read that, it says to me, Mom and Dad, I really want to watch this video or listen to this radio station, and then you give them the most innocent videos, the most innocent radio station. Suddenly they start to trust your judgment, and then boom, baby, you're taking the mushrooms and you're off to the Tool concert.
A little yeast.
And a generation.
Little yeast, yeah.
Little yeast. Exactly.
A little yeast. It wasn't
All right.
a Bethel concert, Chris.
All right.
There's no yeast at the Tool.
I mean, Chris, does this not disturb you that an entire generation of Christians, we had a little how to manipulate your parents page in our teen study Bible?
I don't. You can look at it in that way, and I think what I appreciate about what you just said there was kind of capturing that idea of the teen trying to gain freedom. And that it is that, kind of awkward stage where you are starting to, desire independence. Independence is something that you need eventually. Somebody just said it. It was one of the ladies who's been visiting the church. She just sent her last daughter of 3 off to college, and she was talking to me about having a newborn, and she said that the ultimate goal for rearing a child is independence, right?
Yeah.
And I never thought about it like that, but really that's it. You are trying to get this person to a place where they can be independent, and that's in finances, in any other types of, material responsibilities, but that's also in relationships, to be able to navigate those independently, and in matters of spirituality. So I think that this can be read as being something sort of, divisive, if you take it that way. But I also don't think that teenagers, that it is a bad idea for them to try to include their parents in the process of, kind of coming in. And in the same way that I would ask for counsel from people when there's a decision going on, maybe at the church or anywhere else in my life and in my marriage or anything like that, and I'm having a difficulty kind of knowing what the right course is to take, then I would include somebody perhaps who has more wisdom in this area than me, or a different perspective to kind of come in and look at it. And I think that really fostering strength in the relationship between parents and their children at whatever age they are, coming together and kind of talking through these sorts of things, I don't think that that's necessarily bad, but yeah, I mean, this can be read as like, here's how to get what you want.
Well,
and if a parent was naive enough, I suppose they might be taken for that. But if it's the parent who's saying, you're not going to listen to this stuff anyway, I would think that they would probably have a little more wisdom than to just say, oh, we listened to 5 minutes of it and everything was good. Yeah, you have a free pass now forever. It would be something that they might, follow up with.
Yeah,
I have the foolish, perhaps naive idea that I might actually enjoy all of these experiences with my son one day.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what kind of music are you into? Let me listen to that. That sounds really cool. Let's watch this. Tell me why. What do you love about this music? What do you love about this movie? And in enjoying those things and experiencing
Dr.
them.
Christopher Ryan Gates, good parent alert. All right, buddy.
It's the ideal. Check back with me in a couple of years. We'll see where we're at.
I agree with you.
Yeah, you're actually changing my mind about this. As you're talking, I don't know if it's you or the Holy Spirit or what, but I'm actually turning around on this now. I'm actually kind of enjoying the fact that there is no sort of moral imperative expressed on this page. They literally, they don't even say. They say everybody who listens to this music, they can write the lyrics down. They don't even say if it's good or bad. They talk about the teens who rated the movies. The violent ones are rated the highest. They don't even say, isn't that sad? This is a bad thing. And
nor do they qualify what violence is, because you go back into the 70s in movies and violence was one thing entirely. Yeah. And then now today, in order for a movie to be violent, you have to be seeing someone's organs splayed out on a table or something. Anyway, sorry.
I'm actually kind of turning on this sucker. I think the boys over at Zondervan knew what they were doing. We don't need to tell these kids what's right or wrong. We need to empower them. We need to empower them to be able to figure that out on their own with the responsible amount of interaction with their parents.
Yeah. And hopefully, the thing I think that really annoys, even children, like young kids at 5 to 10, when a parent gives an order or a command or tells a kid they have to do something, the kid's immediate question is why. And then of course that always goes to just irritate the parent, and the general response is because I said so, which should be enough. And in some instances, I understand you don't always get to sit down and have a full in-depth conversation with your kid about something. But when it's an ongoing issue, like what types of entertainment are we going to be enjoying, that should be a conversation that you actually can sit down with your kid and have that conversation. And when they're asking for the why, it's an opportunity for you to share those things. And I think that if a parent cares enough about their kid and is involved enough to actually have those kinds of conversations, I can understand that it can be, extremely difficult, but there's lots of things as we're caring for, my 10-year-old nephew now and kind of parenting and making those kinds of decisions for him. He's asking us for things like smartphones and, wanting to play certain games and all of those sorts of things. And I'm like, no way, dude. Absolutely not going to happen. And we get to sit down. We just had to have a conversation just a couple days ago about one of these. I thought it was really fruitful. And if you have parents if you care enough to put these limitations and restrictions on your children's consumption and things like that, then you'd need to just make sure that you're doing the extra step in telling them and explaining to them why, rather than just saying, that's the devil's music, you don't get to listen to it, because all that's going to do is foster rebellion.
Nick,
you need a transformation of the heart in order for this to be ongoing. You can't just unfollow 3 people and think you did something.
I think we can all agree on that. Nick, one thing I love about this conversation and just this podcast as a whole, and I want to know what you think, is something happened. I don't know what it was. Something happened recently, say in the past couple months, where suddenly, I tend to be approaching all of these subjects as if I were a teen myself, a child perhaps, and somehow Dr. Christopher Ryan Gates has matured and approaches every subject as a parent. So it is almost like
I think that if we went back to the earlier episodes,
and a parent,
you might see that it's been a while, but
working through these things together. There truly is something for everybody. Teens, I'm on your side. I'm trying to help you out. But old Daddy Chris, he's laying down the law.
I'm really proud of you, son.
Oh, that's all I ever wanted to hear. Nick, I'm sorry we dragged you into this.
That's okay.
It doesn't sound like it is.
It's okay. There's other things you could have done with your hour and a half.
I could be eating. I did want to say, as third fiddle here, I I thought we were done being serious when I said all that stuff back there. I actually agree with you. And now that I have a son who's 6 months old, just like you, no, your son's 5 months old, right? I always get this. 5 months?
Yep.
Oh.
Yeah,
Okay. Yeah. Even now, I've been thinking a lot more about like just even having him looking at a screen in general, no matter what's on it. It's like, is that good for him to be? He doesn't watch a whole lot of TV, but yeah, I mean, it's just something to think about.
This
I
is
read
great. Now I
an
got two
article
dads. I got two dads on. I cannot let you get into a dad conversation, Chris. We are running out of time with Nick here. I cannot.
Can we?
There's
We gotta
so
at least
much dad content
finish with
in this
the
podcast.
scripture that's on the page, though.
Circle back to Tool.
We have
gotta
one
at
more
least
thing on the.
finish reading the page.
We have one more thing on the page, and I have something actually very specific I want Nick to talk about. So there's one last thing on the page. Thank God it is a piece of scripture. The first piece of theological content on this Bible study page. And of course, it's Philippians 4:8. Finally, brothers, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. I think they were stretching just a bit, putting this in the context of entertainment, but they had to put a scripture in there somewhere, and they did it. And I think in the context of that scripture, or without it, whatever you want to do, Nick, am I correct in understanding that you are pretty good at avoiding all forms of secular entertainment?
No.
Okay.
No. No. Yeah, if you watch any movies that aren't pure flicks, I think you're just too far gone.
Pure flicks.
Or
They got
Toby Mac.
They got some heaters on PureFlix, bro. Don't be knocking them. They got some blockbusters.
No, I'm joking. We bought it recently. There's some pretty good stuff on there.
I've yet to check it out.
I was
do want to
kidding,
check it
okay.
out. So you don't. So what is your level of monitoring your intake of secular entertainment? Are you a hardliner? Because I know some hardliners. I actually just hung out with some wonderful, beautiful people of a different podcast of mine this weekend, and I brought up the movie Minions. And they said, "Oh, no, we don't watch anything like that." And I thought, well, that's very noble, and that's very
It is a little crude.
Minions.
Chris?
They had one with one of the minions like rubbing his butt around or something weird like that.
That's for
I was watching it with my nieces, and I was like, "This is a little." I don't know how I feel about this right now, to be
Daddy
perfectly
Chris.
honest.
Okay, we are not
Dad
talking
Chris
about
was
Minions.
intrigued by that.
But the point is, there's lots of people who take a pretty good, like, firm, hard stance, a very respectable hard stance on pretty much all secular entertainment. Only music they listen to is worship music. Only movies and TV is pure flicks, things like this. What's your feeling on this? What's your general breakdown of acceptable and unacceptable entertainment?
I mean, like I said, I don't have a really rigid view, and I don't think there is one necessarily in Scripture. I think it probably, for the most part, comes down to personal conviction. I think it comes down to 1 Corinthians 10, where all things are lawful, but not all things are profitable, or all things are beneficial. So I just ask myself, do I think this thing will be beneficial? Do I think it'll be profitable in my Christian walk? And of course, my wife and I are careful. Like, we're not going to watch movies with like sex scenes and stuff like that. We normally don't watch stuff with a whole lot of language, but it just comes down to personal conviction. Because I mean, for me, it's like if I hear language, I don't like, oh my goodness, like it just rings my ears because
Right.
I got saved when I was 20. I was used to it, so it's like whatever. But yeah, I mean, I think it really just comes down to personal conviction. And obviously, with a son, I'm gonna have to figure some things out going forward. Right now, he just lays around on the floor in rolls and sits up, so he can't do any of that yet. But yeah, we're gonna have to just talk about those things as they come, I guess. But I don't have a real rigid thing. I think we just have to think, is what I'm doing glorifying God, and is it going to benefit my Christian walk? And I don't mean that to be a cop-out. I really think it is that simple.
Yeah.
It seems like you agree with this page in the Teen Study Bible.
I want to put this page in my Bible if I ever write one.
The Nick Shalna Teen Extreme Radical Bible will
Yeah.
be straight up plagiarized from the Zondervan's Teen Study Bible, published 1992.
Yeah, right. Which is funny. I did actually. I just preached a sermon recently. It's on YouTube if anyone's bored. But I use the phrase Christian extremist because I think a Christian extremist is someone who loves their neighbor and someone who would die for another person. But,
totally.
Yeah. So we're not blowing up buildings or anything.
No, I love it. Okay, and your mom and your dad, do they trust you to make your own decisions?
I don't know. That's a good question.
That is a good question. I mean, you're only 28 years old, man. You're still a baby.
I haven't even moved out.
I think your brain just fully developed, right? Didn't we talk about that?
Yeah, we did. So I'm officially a person. I'm a human.
Yeah, what is that, 25? Yep. Is it finished developing or 28?
I haven't reaped the benefits yet.
Yeah,
well, waiting for him to kick in.
You've got the rest of your life. Chris, what about you? You've got any rules to help that are significantly distinguished from Nick's?
Yeah, not really. I don't know. I think that's a pretty good take, and as we become adults, and you become ultimately and fully responsible for, everything. As parents, you're responsible for your children up to a certain point, but at some point you go off on your own and you start making all of your own decisions. It is something that you have to be mindful about. And that passage, from Galatians, that your flesh is going to desire things, but we need to be strengthening and feeding our inner man just as much as we are anything else. And I think that for every one of us, as we continue to foster and nurture our relationship with the Lord, He will, make known to us those things that we probably should prune from our lives, those things that are not beneficial. And the list is extremely long, and it does almost it feels almost like anything you do at some point or another is like unfollowing 3 people, because there's so much that is vying for our attention. And I know, Basil, this is something that you've been, really passionate about in the past, is all of these voices, all of these, applications and all of this media wanting to take your attention, to steal your gaze away from the Lord. And it's just one of those things that I think we can't be too careful about, too cautious about, making sure that our eyes are fixed on Him, and that as we are going along, we're allowing Him to come in and kind of and help us discern. But yeah, I'm also not in the camp that if a movie's rated R, then you necessarily shouldn't watch it. So, it's something everybody's got to figure out. It's like the Supreme Court justice who said it back in that decision in the 70s when they were talking about hardcore pornography, I think, and they were asking for a definition. And he said, I know it when I see it.
Yeah, I don't know how to define it, but I know it when I see it.
And I think it's like that for most of us in our Christian life too. When it comes to entertainment that is not glorifying to God, I don't know that there's necessarily a one definition that fits it all, but you should know it when you see it.
I think that is very wise, Daddy Chris. Well, everybody, as we wrap up here, I just want to. I have more of a sort of maximalist strategy. I'll intake everything, but in addition to that, I want everybody to go ahead, take out your phones, open up Instagram or TikTok, or whatever it is.
Follow the Ravel podcast page, first of all.
Don't worry, I'm not going to be one of those youth pastors who tells you to unfollow your fun friends who might not glorify God. But instead, I'm taking a different path. Kids, teens, you're almost adults. Yeah, I see you. And it's time you learn some responsibility. So I want everybody to open up your social media, and I want you to search Christian meme accounts. And I want you to follow 3 Christian meme accounts. that bring glory to God. And now,
Amen.
instead of having a feed filled with Tide Pod eaters, and I don't know what any of these trends are. I think the Tide Pod thing was from like 10 years ago. But you should be intaking as many Christian memes as possible. Nick, I see that you're not on your phone. This is youth group. You need to be on your phone, buddy. Go follow some Christian meme accounts. And while you're at it, follow Ravel Podcast. I'm sure we're on some sort of social media. And while you're at that, you need to follow the Universe Next Door podcast.
Yeah, I just went and did a guest spot with him too, whenever that was. So that's up over there. So
Yeah.
if you like any of this, go give that a listen. And
You know what? I'll say
Nick's
even if
getting the
you
heavy hitters over there.
even if you don't like any of this, you should go, because that's a much better podcast. You should go listen to the Universe
Yeah.
Next Door.
If you like this, you'll like mine slightly less. So check it out.
He's doing a great job over there. Lots of good stuff to check out.
Yeah, tell us what's going on over there. What do you got going on there at the Universe Next Door?
We've well, I mean, I took over about 4 months ago, and so I think the shows started to take form where the idea is kind of to have a guest every week. And actually, this last one was good too. We talked about the teen and young adult exodus in the church, but the week before that, we had on a guy named Beckett Cook, and he lived as a homosexual, and he repented of that and got saved, and so now he has a really cool channel. But that was one of my favorite episodes because he told his testimony, and then we got into like evangelizing with LGBTQ plus and all that. So. So there's always something going on. There's always new people coming on. Like I said, the Scientology lady. We have Wayne Grudem coming on. We have Greg Kokel, and so it's a lot of fun, and it's beneficial. So check it out.
Love it. Go check it. I highly recommend it, everybody. The Universe Next Door on your podcast players there. Nick, thank you so much for sitting third chair here, flying formation with us. We have guests all the time, but it's interesting having a third co-equal triune experience here on Ravel.
Oh, wow. Am I the father?
Yeah, and I'm the son.
Well, I guess that just leaves Nick.
Nick is...
Lowercase s.
Yeah.
I'm not getting struck.
The third and forgotten
Holy
person.
with a W. Wait.
Yeah.
I don't know how that makes sense or why it's a joke, but I'm sure there's something there. Okay, there you go, everybody. You know what to do. If you have any questions or comments, send us an email at contact@ravelpodcast.com. Hit us up on the socials. We're going to be doing a Asked and Not Answered episode eventually, and get your questions and everything on there. And maybe if you have any questions for Nick Shalna, you can send those in to us as well. And one last time, Nick, thank you so much, buddy.
Definitely. Thanks for having me on.
Make sure to order your Teen Study Bible for the next Teen Study Bible study Bible. And eventually we'll be moving into the Extreme Teen Study Bible, which, you guessed it, is even more extreme. And thanks for listening to this episode of Ravel. Make sure to tune in next time. But until then, Chris, you have anything to say to the people?
Godspeed.
Thanks for listening to Ravel. To learn more about who we are, what we believe, or how to support this ministry, visit our website at ravelpodcast.com. If you have a question you would like answered on the show, or to let us know how we're doing, email us at contact@ravelpodcast.com. This project is made possible by the prayers and generosity of listeners just like you.
We lost the license for our ending music, so now we have to do our own. Come on, Nick, take a solo. Wow!
Oh, man.